I just thought of this passage of many as he was talking about that, and then we'll go to kind of the opening question, which is your general thoughts. This is from the Apostle Paul in Romans. Love should be shown without pretending. Hate what's evil. Hold on to what is good. Love each other like the members of your family. Be the best at showing honor to each other. Don't hesitate to be enthusiastic. Be on fire in the Spirit as you serve the Lord. Be happy in your hope. Stand your ground when you're in trouble. Devote yourselves to prayer. Contribute to the needs of God's people. Welcome strangers into your home. Bless people who harass you. Bless and don't curse them. Be happy with those who are happy. Cry with those who are crying. Consider everyone as equal. Don't think you're better than anyone else. Instead, associate with people who have no status. Don't think you're so smart. Don't pay back anyone for their evil actions with evil actions, but show respect for what everyone else believes is good, so on and so forth. But, this is just Paul describing what love requires in light of what Andy had to say. I think it's a great passage. It gets a little weird. We might as well finish it. If possible, to the best of your ability, live at peace with all people. Don't try to get revenge for yourselves, my dear friends, but leave room for God's wrath. Well, wait, what? I thought we were talking about love. It is written, revenge belongs to me, I will pay it back, says the Lord. That must be from the Psalms, probably. Instead, if your enemy is hungry, feed him. If he is thirsty, give him a drink. By doing this, you will pile burning coals of fire on his heads. I'm so confused. Don't be defeated by evil, but defeat evil with good.
Kill him with kindness.
Well, right. So there is some association where there's this idea that we burn with shame. And so when you respond with love, so give them a drink when they're thirsty, that our response is not to take revenge. That's God's work to do. However, we've heard this about this God of grace. So he might not take revenge how we want him to, Probably not going to be like that action hero movie that we imagine. But that there is this sense of like, when you really love somebody, it starts to break down those walls, and they start to reflect on perhaps their destructive behavior, and that brings that burning shame. That's probably the best take I have on that. But this passage is so good. This is after, and something I preached on some time ago, I recommend Romans 12 to everyone. Where Paul starts off, he says, don't be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your minds. I don't know about you, but giving my enemy food and drink is a different mindset than what I think I've been exposed to. So that would be a very renewal of the minds sort of thing. And also thinking that it's not my role to administer justice. So what? They said that to you. And yeah, you could probably destroy them with your words. You probably have a really good zinger. Right? But this is renew your mind. Is that what love requires of you? Is that how Jesus responded to people? Sometimes, though, he had zingers. Anyways, getting ahead of myself. What did y'all think of that episode? Andy's teaching. Responses. You liked it. What's up? Yeah. Woot woot. What'd you like about it, Harry?
I wrote down the old commands were part of the old covenant, and Jesus' new command is the new covenant. That was pretty cool.
And what was his new command?
Love each other like he loved.
Yeah.
I think that's it.
Yeah, I know you got it. Love like Jesus loved.
Jesus' love for you, not for his authority over you. That sounds good.
Yeah, that was right. What is what is the thing that he leverages? Is it his authority?
He leverages love.
Right. He never holds his authority over people. In fact, there's many places, maybe for other reasons, that he's kind of downplaying who he is.
Right.
But it's, yeah. It's this great irony in the story. Like if we were just to look at the storyline as literature, I mean, it's masterful. Because the one who is truly king, who gets this enthronement at the end, his cross is his throne, he gets a crown, and there's all this drama around it, and it's ironic, and yet, even though he's found out to be truly king, he never uses that rightful authority. Instead, he gives up his life. And this is the one king that we're still talking about. You know, Solomon doesn't get a birthday party every year. Guy had 700 wives. I mean, notable. Right? I'm not saying that's a good thing. Right? So, others, what did you think of this?
I like Andy's part about saying he didn't play the God card. Just, I like the fact when they basically say that, you know, if you could step back and think about what you're going to say before you say it, and he really brought that out. I like that too, because I could just imagine the people that are on Twitter and stuff like that. You see them say something one day, and the next day they're apologizing. So you know, take your 5 or 10 minutes you need, and you know, rethink it.
Yeah, there's this ethos in our culture around like, hey, this is just me. And I'm not going to hide who I am. So I'm going to say it. And, all right, you know, but if you're a Christ follower, and I mean, at least at Andy's take, it's like, is that what love requires of you? I mean, that might be what you're thinking, but...
Get off your pedestal, huh?
Yeah, I mean, is there a greater dynamic that would guide our lives, other than this is what I'm feeling right now, and you know, I'm just being true to myself, and really, you know, I mean, for some people, I think, really, yeah, that's as good as it gets, because they haven't, I don't know, haven't done the work to really think this through, to really understand it. I know. I have another thought, but I'll save it. I'll fill up the space for the next 30 minutes. Others? What did you think about the don't forget your goat? Is that what we both laughed at?
God is no longer a don't forget your goat God.
I was imagining a sermon series titled "Don't Forget Your Goat."
You don't sacrifice anymore that way.
You should have. Maybe Sam would find a damn donkey. I know. You keep telling me. 2 more years to train it before Palm Sunday.
I have comments that I can't.
All right.
Way to step back, right?
Somebody, yeah, is that what love requires of you, Andy?
This time.
Would somebody like to read number 2 there?
Andy said Jesus wasn't commanding his followers to feel something. He was commanding them to do something. What do you make of this remark? Can you do love without first feeling love?
Do without All right, Marge, you a yes or a no on this one?
Oh my.
Just give me a yay or a nay.
I think maybe yes.
Okay, Sadie?
I think it should be yes.
Okay. Nora, yes or no? Where are you? All right, yes or no?
Sound like a yes to me.
Yes.
Okay, she's a yes. Sadie, yes or no?
Yes.
Okay, Josh?
Can you yes? I feel like it'd be
Yes.
feeling it.
Be difficult. Whitney?
I say yes, only to kind of counter what you just said. I think sometimes you have to, like, almost sometimes do it before you can, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, there's,
With some people in some situations.
so, this is my train. Yeah. Here's the wheels, and the question is, that's the smoke. Thank you. Is the engine the feelings and the doing the caboose, or vice versa? We'll get it. Andy, yes or no?
I'm gonna break the train, either chain, I'm gonna go with no.
No. All right.
Is
The cut?
is thinking feeling?
I don't know.
I'm just, basically saying, if you see somebody in need and you think about it afterwards or feel it afterwards, but I think you give me a yes.
I'm gonna go yes. All right.
Yes.
Nay.
Nay.
Yes.
Nay.
Yes.
I still go with no.
All right. All right, oddballs, defend yourselves. Just kidding. Anybody
Put your
want to
guns
comment on
away,
it? Yeah.
I would say, like, if you, like, okay, for example, a few years ago, I had a man who was, like, super, super rude to me behind me in the drive-thru line at McDonald's, yelling all kinds of horrible things because I was not moving quickly enough for his liking. And I paid for his food. Okay?
Burning coals of shame.
I
On his head.
I have probably never in my life wanted to flip off somebody as much as that man. I've never flipped off anybody in my life. I wanted to that day. And I just thought, I'm paying for your food. And
Take that way.
take that. And I just remember at the time I was in grad school, so I actually lived at home with my parents, and I came home and I told my mom, and she said, and I quote, "You burned those heaping coals on his head." I was like, exactly.
Man.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
So that was like out of anger and love all at the same time. But I thought maybe he's having a bad day. Like the advocate for him was kind of going through my brain at the time, and I thought, take that.
Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, the ending of that passage from Paul is, do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. And I think that that's, a risk that we take, or something that is, it is a belief. Do you truly believe that good can eventually overcome evil? Because there's a lot of evidence out there that would suggest otherwise. And so becoming a Christ follower, part of this movement, is this like somewhat subversive choice to say, you know what, I believe fries and hamburgers for free cure-all, at least can make a difference. And man, let's just believe the best about this fella for a moment. And he's probably thinking like, man, I'm either an a-hole or that is a really great way to get some free food. All right, so others on this.
My no came from a little different perspective. Like, instead of a one-on-one altercation, it's just like a whole as a person. Okay, I work with this guy. He's just a jerk. Okay, but I get along with him really well. But he's a jerk to 90% of the people he comes across. But there's that 10% he comes across that he just goes above and beyond. He'll go above and beyond to a random person. And I think that he has felt love at some point. That's why he can return the love. Okay? And if he hadn't felt love, I don't think he could return love. So there's someone I've heard him talk about his childhood and it was rough, but he had, you know what I'm saying, from various things. And I don't know if he wouldn't have had that if he would be able to get it back. So that's why I said that.
Yeah, I think that's good. For me, there's a bit of a tension in this because I think that, you know, the good news is, you know, for God so loved the world, would be one summary of it from John 3:16, right? And so this idea that like God is indeed a God of grace. It's not the old covenant. It's not the if you do then He will, and if you don't then God won't dynamic anymore. It's rather what Jeremiah talked about and what the gospel is about, that God loves you. And it's not based on what you've done. It's based on who you are to Him and really who He is to you, like the good parent. And that letting that love in, as we've been talking about, like that messes with your heart. That's the heart transplant or transformation that this thing is all about. And so that, for me, feels like that's the thing that enables it. Now, in the moment, I might not be feeling the love for this person here, but I'm feeling the love here, or at least I'm convicted by it. And so, I I kind of get with you there. I would have gone over here. I didn't measure myself, but it's maybe a little closer.
That was an option.
Yeah, I know. If you have the marker, you do what you want. Power! Say, Jesus didn't leverage his power, but I do. Others. Anybody else? Yeah, Josh.
So this question kind of reminds me of 1 Corinthians 13. You know, you can do all these great things, but if you don't feel it, you're essentially empty.
Yeah.
So that's like speak with God's eloquence and have all the answers and give all your possessions to the poor, but you don't love, you're empty. So that's kind of what I think. That's why I said yes, that you can do all those things and not feel it at all, and it's just worthless. It's empty.
Yeah.
So I don't know. That's kind of why I said yes.
Yeah. I think the counter that maybe Andy would make, or at least, I should just speak for myself, but this comes from his teaching, is that he says in that John 13 text that what Jesus does is he makes love a verb. We think of love as a noun, as it's a feeling, it's something, like a chair you can, fall out of, or fall into. But the way that Jesus speaks about it is it's a verb. It's something that you do, and specifically you do it like He did it. And so, in light of that Paul text is, unless you're engaged in this sacrificial forms of love, you can be this prophet and you can say all these things. But at the end of the day, it's going to boil down to whether or not you're loving in the way that Jesus did. Which is, part of the piece of this that I think is perhaps helpful and also challenging. Because maybe you've heard this before, but I get it a fair bit from folk that I meet. Well, it's, I don't really go to church, and I kind of believe in Jesus, but it's all really the same. And the more I learn about Jesus, the more I'm like, well, there's probably similarities, but, distinctively Jesus is saying it's all about loving in the model that I've loved. And so if somebody is loving sacrificially in the way that Jesus did, out of a sense of who God is, then yeah, cool, we're on the same page. But anything outside of that, I think you're missing. And that's the bold, scandalous claim. And so, all those great things that are said in 1 Corinthians, you know, they're beautiful. Being patient, that's great. But at the end of the day, if your heart isn't willing, you know, if your actions aren't willing to engage in that sacrificial love where you value people over your specific viewpoint or agenda or what have you, then it seems like you're missing it. Sticky territory, right?
And I would almost counter my argument then that sometimes your heart's just not in it, but when you actually, oh, I don't feel like doing it, but I'm gonna do it anyway. Once you start acting, it changes your heart. Like you have that change of your outlook, you know. So what you intended to actually, like, I'll just do it and do it.
Yeah.
It actually changes you. Better mood, you feel better about yourself, you're helping others, so it can't change you. So I almost argue that if you act, your heart will follow.
Yeah,
So.
yeah. When I do marital counseling for folks, like premarital counseling, I have them watch one of Andy's old series called Staying in Love. And so he addresses this whole bit, and that's where I got this wonderful idea. But he says, you know, when you first get together, it's the feelings, right? It's the attraction and the infatuation stage that drive the doing. But when you get married, at some point, this whole equation, it flips. And to be a seriously married couple is doing the love, especially when you're not feeling it. Especially when you're not feeling it. Because you're committed to the relationship. And so he talks about how Jesus would have been a terrible marriage counselor because you would have come up to him and be like, well, you know, you got problems in your marriage, you should love each other. Well, that's the problem. We're not feeling in love. Well, you should love each other. Like, no, do the love, right? If you do the love, then you'll feel the love, and you'll have more love, right? And so that whole bit, and I think that that's really powerful. Last night, I wasn't feeling the love, but I did the love with my little buddy Jack. Barely remember doing it, but about 4 a.m., I was like, went in his room, he's standing there with his 3 stuffed animals and 2 blankets. I brought him into bed, and then he put his foot in my face for the next 2 hours while I sort of slept, you know, right? It's like I was not feeling happy about that equation. So I think parenting, especially little ones, is a great example of this. Because it's sacrifice of sleep and what have you all the time. Anybody else? Oh, we need a reader. So guys, anybody yet? Anyone?
I'll read it.
All right, Harry.
You could say that the big shift in Jesus' new commandment was from the perspective of selfishness to that to selflessness. From that of self to that of Christ. The golden rule, which summed up the law and the old covenant way of life, stated, so in everything, do to others what you would have them do to you. The platinum rule, as Andy calls it, states, love each other as I have loved you. Why such a shift necessary for God to accomplish his redemptive plan? Why was such a shift necessary for God to accomplish his redemptive plan?
Yeah, it's a big question.
No, baby.
We're going from gold to the platinum.
It's having them do to you versus you're responsible for your actions and your response to others. Instead of it being inward, it's outward.
Okay, I'm not quite connecting. So, do unto others as you'd have them do to you.
Right, because you're waiting on them to do it to you, so that's how you're going to respond to them. But the platinum is you're loving as Jesus loved, going outward.
So Jesus' love is the standard here.
Right.
I think where I'm missing, I think that your love, right? Whereas in the Old Testament, there's the old eye for eye, which is others' love, right? And so in that, this goes back to this idea, this big idea of the hinge, that Jesus is the hinge on which the Old Testament and the New Testament hang. And I think that that's really helpful because sometimes if you were to read the Gospels, you could encounter pieces that would make you go, oh, hold on, that sounds like Jesus is advocating something other than this single love commandment. And so the perspective is that when we're, you got Old Testament, then we have, so that's like this big thing. And then we have the Gospels, and then we have the rest of the New Testament or the New Covenant. And in the Gospels, his teachings are leading to this final moment of this one commandment. That's a new perspective that I've gotten from all this. And so when we go from eye for an eye, that's Old Covenant. And in Matthew chapter 5, Jesus addresses that. And we get to the golden rule and the Sermon on the Mount, but we don't get to the platinum rule, as Andy calls it. It's pointing that way, but we also don't get Jesus summarizing or prioritizing the greatest commandment that comes later too. But it is this kind of move from here to here. And we are here. I feel like I completely railroaded your comment, Sherry, and went somewhere else.
It's okay, I don't think it was a very good one anyway.
Thank you for your grace. Does this make sense? Like, how do you all feel about that? Is that connecting? Is that...
It's complicated.
Okay.
I think it's similar to that. Like, do unto others as I have done unto you. When you look at that simply, like, that was my mom's goal when growing up, okay? So that, I always went by that, but I never expected anything in return. I just treated people how I wanted to be treated. So I didn't realize until I was an adult that treating other people how you want to be treated means give and take. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm going to treat you good. I'm going to help you move, but I'm going to want you to help me install my cable. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So, but love each other as I have loved you is I'm just going to help you move. You know what I'm saying?
There's no restrictions attached to it.
There's no strings.
Yeah.
I'm just going to help you because I love you
Right.
and you need help.
Right.
There's nothing expected in return.
Yeah. And then it's just kind of like this feeling or belief that if you put enough good in the world, that it's going to be good.
Yeah.
Right? But then again, our Savior dies on the cross, so we know that it doesn't all work out completely.
Right.
I mean, it does in the end. That's the story of the resurrection, right? That somehow life triumphs over death. But like, I think that the cross is this reminder that just because you're loving in the world doesn't mean that people are going to all be compelled to help you with your cable.
Right.
Right. And like, I mean, this is kind of part of the hook of my current sermon series around taking the risk to follow Jesus. Like, that feels like a bit of a gamble, you know? Like, and then the promise is that somehow you're going to have this treasure in heaven, meaning this like, this benefit that is otherworldly, that is beyond the limits of this earthly life, and that's going to be worth it. That's kind of the selling point. And, can't really completely define what that is going to be for you, but it's going to be good. And you're on board. All you got to do is give up your life for this. That's...
I think that's why he kept saying it was so demanding. It really is. Because I was thinking just like you guys were, that eye for an eye thing, when it says you, well, you know, what happened if you, you took the first punch and the guy goes, well, okay, I can hit you back now, you know? And that had nothing to do with love, but it, you know, it's better expressed in the Bible.
Yeah. Other thoughts about this?
So I feel like he's up in the game, just like Sermon on the Mount, where he just takes the basic fundamentals, adds to it, holds it to a higher standard. The old, you know, golden rule, you know, it's just kind of more of a basic mediocrity. Oh, if you treat me good, I'll treat you good. And then he's adding to it saying, love like God, you know, so that takes it up a notch. So he's just adding to it just like he has added to other standards to make us better.
Yeah, I mean, the simplicity of the one commandment of the new covenant, that's compelling, and it feels like we're getting off easy. But then again, when you think it through, it's like, oh, that one commandment raises the bar super high, and it also eliminates the loopholes. There's a benefit to having lots of laws. We got lots of laws, you have a lot of ways to kind of reshape them and find loopholes. And that's what actually the Pharisees were masters of, and the religious leaders of the day. Jesus calls them out all the time. But when the question of what does love require of me, and the standard is the way that Jesus loved, that's kind of hard to get past, unless you don't know Jesus. Right? And that would probably be one of the dominant things I'm attempting to incorporate in my preaching and teaching and my ministry here is, you know, you might know what people have said about Jesus, but do you know what Jesus really said? And until you're able to start paraphrasing the man and recalling his stories and that sort of thing, I don't think you really know. Because, like, there's certain situations I can tell you what my dad would say or my mom would say. I could do an impression of my mom. And it would be hilarious, but I wouldn't. Right? It's like, and in your life, there's people you're like, yeah, I know exactly what they're going to say. Because you know, you've spent time with them. And that's the idea. And so if Andy and I get in a dispute, we would say, we're both Christ followers, we would say, you know, well, what does love require of us here? And we might have some different takes on that, but if we're like truly bought in disciples, it would be super nerdy, but it would be like, well, Jesus said this, and well, do you remember the story here? And that would be like, at least the way I imagine it, the context in which our conversation would develop. And we would let the master's words and his teaching and perspective guide our conversation. Versus what people tend to do is we talk kind of ambiguously about love and what have you, and it's not tied to any real concrete standard. Or if it is, it's this somewhat abstract standard, and I think that that's also part of this teaching that really gripped me, is that it's tied to a person. A historical person with 4 accounts of this person's life. And so we can come to know this person in a way that is far more, I think, resilient and helpful than a cold hard standard, a set of 10 commandments on stone tablets. You know? But that is, I mean, as followers of Jesus, to be his followers, we start to learn him, come to know him. Not because we're trying to earn our way in. I mean, that could go legalistic, and Christians do that. But simply because I'm asking the question day in, day out, with McDonald's guy harassing me, or you know, whatever. What does love require of me? And the standard of love is the way that Jesus loved. And so, what are the stories that come to mind when I think of how Jesus loved?
Just curious, when did the feeling hit you to to buy his breakfast or
As he
dinner.
was yelling horrible things at me.
Okay, I didn't know if it was right at the last minute when you got up to the window or if it was before that. That's great. You had the feeling all the way then.
Yeah. As the master says on the cross, Father, forgive them for they know not what they do.
Yep.
Right? You know, I mean, I don't know if that's what went through your head, but there's a teaching that would lead you to do that sort of thing. And I mean, hey, full disclosure, this just might be the way I'm wired. So if this is not the way you're wired, there's other ways I'm sure. But you know, there's the teaching of the Holy Spirit who will remind you of everything I've taught you and teach you everything else you need to know. That's in John 13, 14. Just in that Last Supper discourse. You know? In you, but we need those teachings. Did you catch what Andy, when he kind of, the Jewish term would be midrash, he kind of added to the moment when Jesus was in that Last Supper discourse and the whole love one another as I love you, and he looks at the disciples and he starts, do you all remember that part? Remember what he said? Well, so he's like, you know, Nathan,
Oh, yeah.
you know,
Why did you?
when you found out that I was the Messiah, what'd you say? You said, could anything good come from Nazareth? You didn't just diss me, you dissed my entire town, right? You know, I mean, it's like, you guys insulted me, you rejected me, you interfered, like, you know, there was this time where I did this difficult teaching and everybody else left, and you guys were all ready to leave me. You're about ready to abandon me, and I never brought that back up. You know, that's all Andy kind of taking some liberties with the text, but I think it's really compelling. It's like, you know, hey, I let all that go. So, I'm just saying, when you guys hurt each other, how are you supposed to act? That is good. Think back on your own spiritual journey. How would you put into words the love you received from Christ? What shape has divine love taken in your mind and heart and life? Log your thoughts in the space below before sharing them with your group. Consider them logged. You may share them.
Very good
Yeah.
question.
People are building courage.
Buddy wants to talk.
I know for me, like, it's not like a outwardly blessing, you know what I'm saying? It's like, it's not, I haven't been rewarded with riches or anything like that, but I don't know what it is, man, but I just get along with people really well. It doesn't matter who it is, and I hope saying it out loud doesn't affect it, but I just get along with people. Like I told you about that guy that just doesn't like people, loves me. Like, I've had other people like that, just like, no one likes them, they like me. I don't know what it is, but it's just, it's always been like that. I tend to get along with people no one else can get along with. And it's always...
That's a gift.
And I mean, there's probably other stuff that I take for granted. You know what I'm saying? It's just things that just happen like that I put no effort into. It's just stuff that just happens. I mean, we've all probably been gifted with divine love by having a near miss in traffic, or or stuff like that. You know, it happens all the time, and we just take it for granted.
I also think about the people that are placed in your life, you know, that you come across, that by accident you meet or you come in contact with, you know. I think that's divine love.
There's this retired minister that I visited with back when I was a chaplain, Calvin Word, I don't forget him. He's a blind African-American guy, you know, and that's relevant just because of the way he spoke. I walked in, I thought he was asleep. He's blind. I didn't know he was blind. And I was about to walk out, and he goes, something along the lines, the Lord is so good to me because he sent me another one of his friends to be with me in the light. He's like, come on over here. He's like a friend of the Lord coming to see me, you know. And then just in his mind, I wasn't some chaplain intern. I was like sent by the Lord. And I mean, it was humble, right? But I mean, you know, and I tried to cultivate that view. Like, this is not just another person that you know, Lord sent these people. Feel loved in that sense. Others feel God's love in any sort of way.
For me, kind of know a lot of my story. Work-wise, I was extremely driven before I came to Christ. That was 15 years ago. I became 42 years old. And as an electrician, I was hell-bent on being better and getting it done better, quicker than everybody else. And it didn't matter what happened. And I didn't take any prisoners at all. It was just step on everybody. And then I come to Christ, and then started running into those people that I had really walked all over or mistreated years down the road. And they couldn't believe the conversion or how I changed. And I still pretty competitive, still want to get the job done, but I'm not looking at trashing people anymore. And it just, when that first started happening, I mean, I'd run into an apprentice that I had that I probably treated pretty poorly, and come back, and his turn to get back at me, and I changed, and they couldn't believe it, and most of them were happy to see it. And that was refreshing and eye-opening. Hey, this is really happening. This is when I've really done this.
Yeah.
And it still happens. I still run into guys.
Yeah. Who's the soft and squishy guy that used to be Andy?
Yeah, it still comes out from time to time. But not much. They still having fun. But yeah, that was, I mean, the first few guys that you've changed. Yeah, I had. And I guess I really haven't paid that much attention or realized how poorly I treated people.
Anybody else? What difference do you think Jesus expects his love to make in and through your life?
I think he just wants to give you peace. And in turn, I think he wants you to give that peace.
There's a book that my dad would always recommend. I own it and I've read some of it. It's called Good News for Those Who Try Harder. And it's all about how we can, especially some personalities, and I tend to have that of just try, but it's also in this kind of old covenant thinking of you've got to earn your way in sort of thing. You know, there's peace that comes from this good news.
Well, you've described it through your time being here as servant leadership. And basically, if you do that, I think you're going to make disciples. You're going to make friends. I've made, thank goodness, plenty of friends. I hope with just getting together, being together. A lot easier to learn about people that way.
Yeah. So we get some peace. Get some relationships because of servant leadership. And it's not the only way, but I think, yeah. Anybody else experience a difference?
Something kind of infectious about it too. I mean, once you do it, you want more.
Mm.
So it not only just helps other people, it helps you as well. And not to have this be all about drive-through conversations, but you see on the news, where one person pays for the other person behind them, and then it goes on for like an hour and a half of people just trying to help the other person, and it's just infectious. So it's hopefully kind of help change you as well.
I think the infectious part of it too is, I remember, years ago, I would see couples and people that were just joyful in their in their servant leadership, and just their lives were happy, and they were just so overwhelmed with, what they were getting from God and the church, and I looked at that and it was just like, I want that. I want to get to that point where I have that. And that's coming out of me, so I kind of think it's the same thing, that infectiousness that you want that.
Yeah, and I think you named it with this, and it's tied to this joy piece. When Aunt Sherry, my mom's sister, became a Christian later in life, if Aunt Sherry was into something, she would talk to you about it at family gatherings. But boy, when she became a Christ follower, woo, you better watch out if you didn't want to hear about her church. But it was joy, just pouring out of her, and that's great, right? And I think that, we've had this conversation, you and I and kind of ministry leaders, especially when we first started having a go at it, of like, we want to have a church experience that we don't feel like we have to tell people about, but we can't help but to want to tell them. Like, hey, there's something really good here. Or, like when you start like connecting with something, when maybe the dots are starting to be connected, and you're like, I'm going to go ahead and read the next chapter, even though we're not going to talk about it for a couple weeks, because something about this is tying things together, and it's helpful.
I've heard of other people, like you don't have to like tell people about the church or Jesus, but sometimes people see that on you, that joy, that you have, and they're like, I want that, just like you mentioned. Or like, Andy's personality, the changes that he's made, people are looking at it and go, wow, I want that. What made you change? And it has that kind of seek you out.
Yeah.
That's what
That
Jesus says.
conversation.
That's what Jesus says. By this, everyone will know you are my disciples if you live in me.
Yeah, it's the like, what is up with that guy? Or what's up with that lady? Like something's different about them. This afternoon I spent time with Tom Knapp's family, and Tom he was physically alive, but his brain was dead. And I just thought about how, in that moment, that this is where it counts. It's not the only place. And that passage from Romans, like cry when it's time to cry, and laugh when it's time to laugh. And the ability to be sad but not overcome. And I think one of mine is that it gives us courage. Jesus talks about not being afraid about as much as anything. And, I believe that Tom is up in heaven. And I think Tom was a very nice man. But my belief that he's in heaven has nothing to do with Tom. It has everything to do with my choice to believe Jesus and what he says about who God is. And so therefore, I can be sad in that situation, but I'm not afraid. And I think that there were others in that space that were kind of that way. And so there was a conversation around having one of the granddaughters come and whether she could be part of it or not. And I mostly listened, but when they asked my opinion, I said, well, I think you all are handling this quite well as a family, and to include the granddaughter and to show her that you guys can be sad and grieve but not be afraid is powerful. She's gonna suffer from this anyways, right? So maybe don't hide it from her and don't make her do it alone. So that love, right? And then we as a church, a collective of Christ followers, you know, this is where we give each other permission to speak into each other's lives and say, look, I know this is hard, but don't be afraid. We can be sad, we can grieve, there's loss, but we believe in a God that loves us. And it's right now in the scary point where we need to really lean in. And I mean, if you keep reading, right, when he goes, so that's John 13 that Andy was making a big deal about. John 14, you probably heard it. He says, don't let your hearts be troubled. In my Father's house there's many rooms. That's the next teaching. Right? And I'm going to go and prepare a place for you. And you know the way. You know the way. The God of grace. And then because I believe it's a true story, Philip goes, where are you going? We don't know the way. Wait, what are you talking about? Right? So, yeah, I think Al-Anon is showing up. We have one more of these, and then on Wednesday night next week is trunk or treat, holler, and on Saturday morning, anybody wants to help wipe down some tables and chairs that desperately need it, maybe install some ceiling tile, cut down the bush that's gotten overtaken.
When is that?
Saturday morning.
Saturday.
This Saturday?
Yep.
I would love to cut down a bush.
Cool.
Chainsaw ready.
We got a chance.
He's already connecting.
I feel like it was.
Bring your chainsaws, other saws, heavy equipment of any kind.